Hey, how's it going? What's going on? Let's get to work. I hope you guys are ready for another story today. Today we're gonna tell a story from my high school days. This story involves some different, we're gonna jump around in time a little bit, but everything takes place from about 1980 to about 1984. And it's about these three friends of mine: Samantha, Julie, and John. I've already done some drawing here, and I figured that while I tell the story, I'll embellish a little bit on the drawing as I embellish uh, the story itself, and we'll see how it turns out. Um, and let's get going. So, a couple days ago, I was reminded during a conversation of this comic shop that I worked at during high school. And at this comic shop where I worked at, across the way, it was in like this little mall type thing, but across the way from this comic shop where I worked was a magic shop. And inside this magic shop was this kid named John. That this kid right here, this kid named John. And I got to know him as, not really coworkers. He managed the shop across from my shop, but this was a pretty laid back place. So we would hang out, and after work we would chill and just, do what teenagers do, hang out. And so we became friends, became buddies. But he had a separate group of friends than I did because he's a couple of years younger than me. Uh, but when I met him at work and first recognized him there, I realized that I we had met before, and he remembered where we had met before, and it had been some years earlier, 2 or 3 years earlier, and it had been at my friend Samantha's house, which was three houses down from my house on my same street. So this girl, Samantha and Julie, or this girl Samantha and her best friend Julie, were friends of mine in high school, same age as me. Samantha was this girl that was really into punk at the very beginning of punk. She was like the only girl in my high school, the first girl to have crazy hair. She wore a mohawk. She had these braids that came off it. You know who she looked like? She looked like that the lead singer from that Bow Wow Wow band that did that song "I Want Candy," except Sam was hotter than that girl. Uh, and so she had a friend. Her best friend was Julie, and Julie looked like a hotter Marsha Brady. And these two, in certain ways, were were somewhat opposite, but they were totally together and attracted into this pair. This they're together most of the time, and they're like alpha predators. So they're both very hot. This one's popular. This one's not. This one comes from a wealthy background. This one is a child of a single mom, latchkey type. One day, I come home from school about 2 or 2:30, and the phone rings, and it's Sam, and she wants me to come over and bring a bottle of rubbing alcohol. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll bring over a bottle of rubbing alcohol. I can tell by the way she's talking, and maybe even my mother mentioned something. I think she's been calling for a while, and every time my mom picks up, Sam hangs up. So, so I know something's up. They've been waiting for me to come home. So I take this rubbing alcohol over there. I feel like I forgot to mention certain particulars about this story, like why I'm friends with these girls. So the reason why I'm friends with these girls is because at this point in high school, I'm selling pot. Not selling pot to everybody, just people that are my friends. And these two girls are my friends and neighbors and are my regular customers. Um, Also, they're really cool. They're super edgy and weird. As you can see, Sam's all dressed in a punk outfit, and Julie is wearing a Star Trek uniform. Now, I never saw her in a Star Trek uniform in real life, but the reason why she's wearing that Star Trek uniform is because the two of them were really weird. And they had, so it was the first time I'd ever seen zines, like punk music zines, uh, bootleg things, edgy, weird shit. These girls were into creepy, edgy, weird shit. Anyway, this girl, Julie, had a Star Trek fanzine, and in this zine, there was a fan fiction story about Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock having a gay romance. These girls couldn't wait to share that with me and show that to me. These girls would come over to my house all the time to buy weed from me and just to squat in my room. As I mentioned, they were like alpha predators, and they would like rifle through my shit. It was difficult to resist them fucking poking fun and messing around because you're just like in the presence of these ridiculously hot chicks. So I get to Sam's house with the rubbing alcohol. I walk in and there's this kid sitting at the dining room table, and it's this kid John, who would eventually a couple years later become my friend. But at this point, he's like an eighth grader or a freshman. I've never seen him before. He's sitting there at the table. He's been freshly shorn. I can see that the girls have shaved his head not long ago. There's some nicks. There's some red spots where I can see Sam pushed too hard and it got a little red. And I can see on the back patio that there's a chair back there, and I can see that they shaved his head. This isn't the first time they've shaved some kid's head. These two, as I mentioned, alpha level predators. They would meet these kids at the beach, and then drink beer or smoke weed with them. And then before the kid knows it, he's back at Sam's house. They're listening to Dead Kennedys, and these two girls have convinced this kid to let them shave his head and put eyeliner on him. So I get over there, I can see that John has had his head shaved, and I can also see that he's holding 2 ice cubes. He's holding an ice cube behind his ear, and he's holding an ice cube in front of his ear. He's trying to numb his ear because Sam's getting ready to pierce his ear with this safety pin, right? Like a full size. It's like this is an actual size safety pin I'm drawing. This is the size of the pin that Sam was preparing to jab through John's earlobe this Tuesday afternoon. So she wanted the rubbing alcohol for obvious reasons. She wanted to sterilize the safety pin and sterilize the earlobe before she pierced it. So I guess once she felt it was numb enough and the kid was scared enough, she began pushing. This is John's ear. And this is the hole that she started pushing that safety pin into. And she starts pushing. As she's pushing, John kind of winces and backs away, but she keeps pushing, and a little hole starts coming, and a little blood starts dripping, and he's fighting off tears and trying to be perfectly still, and Sam's meeting resistance on the earlobe. And this is the first she's acting. Both these girls are always acting tough, always acting super tough, right? But Yeah, maybe this is a situation where she's never actually pierced somebody's ear with a safety pin. She's realizing that her 15-year-old 102-pound body might not have the strength physically, and also might not have the strength emotionally to hurt this kid any more than she's already hurting him. She looks over at Julie, and Julie shakes her head like, I'm not going to help you or do this. And she looks at me, and I'm shaking my head like, I want you to stop, but at the same time, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm packing a bowl, and I'm not going to say much. Alpha level predators. So, it doesn't happen. She gives up, luckily, and she couldn't do it. And the kid's okay. He has a little bloody spot in his ear, and I'm sure his mom was pissed when he got home with the shaved head. A couple years later, turns out that this kid works at the magic shop across from me, and we become friends. And he's the guy that works in the magic shop, and he's a good one, actually. Probably the only good one that I've met. Usually they're obnoxious, and this guy's whole job was to do tricks for tourists and then sell those tricks to the tourists. A lot of those guys are really nerdy and geeky, and this guy wasn't. This kid was cool. So, yeah, these two girls. These two girls. So I liked Sam a lot. Here's a couple things that she gave me that I still have. She gave me this Ronald Reagan Tell Me That I'm Dreaming pin. This was from 1982. She gave me this in 1982, and it's an original one, right? Isn't that cool? And then, remember how I said that I mentioned how they would come into my room and kind of mess with my stuff? So this came out of one of the stash boxes that I had in my room, where I would keep like my pipes and my rolling papers. And Sam found this. She must have opened it up, and then she stuck this sticker in here. It was stuck in there, and she wrote "Stoned Again" on it. So yeah, so I got a little something, a couple little pieces of Sam left over from those days. So, the kids that I hung out with, these two girls, not John, these two girls and my other friends at this point, there was like a running thread between all of us, and it had to do with just typical teenager shit, drugs and alcohol, and at the time, I really thought that because this group of friends that I had weren't doing good in school and were doing drugs and alcohol, and I thought that we were bad, that we weren't doing as good as we were supposed to be doing, and disappointments. I felt guilty and bad for it all, right? But then now, in retrospect, looking back, I totally know for a fact that these kids, man, a lot of them had really big problems, and me included. So the drugs and alcohol it's like a natural self medication when you're this age and you're just learning about life. Um, these drawings are not very good, but trust me, this girl looked like the lead singer from Bow Wow Wow. Is that the name of that band? I Want Candy, Bow Wow Wow? And this girl looked like Marsha Brady. Now, what's funny about these two, and I told you they had initiates. I'll call John was like an initiate. This is not the only one, right? They did this to other kids. They would like convert them into punkism. But the last thing I want to mention, so I talked enough about Sam. I want to tell you a little bit about Julie. So Julie came from this wealthy family in Pebble. Oh shit! I almost spilled my drink. This wealthy family in Pebble Beach. Excuse me. She came from this wealthy family in Pebble Beach, and they had a big house with this open floor plan with an open beam ceiling and uh, glass walls. What do you call that? I don't know. Like half of the side of the house is made of glass, and Excuse me, it's all open. Like the kitchen, dining room, living room is all like one big room with like Mexican tiled floor, and there's a giant parrot cage in her house, like a professional zoo style bird enclosure with African grays and macaws, and it's like 16 feet high by like 10 feet diameter. I don't know, it's fucking huge. And these birds are so obnoxious. So if you're at her house, it's impossible to talk on the phone. It's almost impossible just to have a conversation with her mom, um, and to watch TV. But her mom is strangely, completely oblivious to the sounds that the parrots are fucking making. And it's just like she's a pretty bird. And these things are big and like 50 years old, and they're obnoxious. So her mom was totally aware that uh, that Julie is, in her eyes, unhappy, and that she's hanging out with a bunch of unhappy troublemaker kids. So Julie was always getting sent to these. Why am I not drawing? I'm fucking just talking. I could be drawing. And maybe I'm afraid of making it worse than it already is. That's a lot of the time. That's what I'm afraid of. So Julie was always getting sent to these different things, and one of the things that she got sent to the most at this time were these things called encounter groups. And this one that she got sent to, I almost don't even want to talk about it because it was so creepy, but I think you can probably look it up and Google it. But it was called Est Seminar, I think. Est Encounter. There was another one too called Sage. These stood for something. This stands for something. This stands for something. Um, these are uh, like supposedly you send your and I know a lot. You want to know the reason why I know a lot about this? Because I went to high school with more than two or three girls that went through all of it. So Julie's not the only girl that I knew that went to Est and Sage. So Est was this first it was like a weekend, but like with Julie, she went and stayed for even longer, and she went to this other place in Carmel Valley that I don't even want to say the name because I think it still exists and it's so creepy. So they're like quasi religious cults that involve transcendental meditation, uh, group therapy, encounter, nudity, even firewalking. I'm not kidding. Julie told me about how she walked on coals. She really walked on coals. They like hypnotized her in Carmel Valley. So, so at Est, this is like the main memory of Est. The whole main memory of Est that I have was from her telling me about from the beginning, like for when she came back from the first weekend or the second weekend or something. She's telling me and Sam about what happened. And her mother is hoping that she's going to be able to somehow reprogram Julie and make her into a nice girl instead of a mean girl. But what happens is, Julie sees through all of it. But anyway, she tells us towards the end of this encounter group, they all take their clothes off, and you have to be completely nude and sitting in a circle, and then they have to like point out their imperfections or something. And she there was like a name for it, like the come down or the push down or the jam up. I don't remember. There's a bunch of weird lingo that went with it all as well. But so she tells me and Sam about her being completely naked and sitting in this circle with all these adults, because mostly it's like adult hippies, I believe. But then if it's not grown up hippies, then it's going to be hot like fucking cheerleader types. I'm not kidding. That's who is going. There's no dudes. There's not going to be any high school or teenage or young men here. It's all these chicks. So she tells me this story, and in my freaking 15 or no, this was like 16 or 17. In my like 16-year-old mind, all I can picture is Julie sitting naked, crisscross applesauce in a sandbox with a bunch of strangers, and me imagining, man, if I could somehow get to Est. But then I'm like, there's no way I'm taking off my clothes and sitting naked in front of all these strangers, let alone in front of Julie. But I just want to imagine Julie naked sitting in the valley. Anyway, that's the entire story, you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Not much more to it than that. Have a great evening. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Wait, did I tell you about this? This box? Oh, yeah. It says stoned again inside.